The moment Madison Harper said those words, I felt something inside my chest quietly collapse. "Stay home," she repeated. "I'm embarrassed to introduce you as my boyfriend." The room went silent in a way that felt unnatural. Not quiet, heavy. We were standing in the kitchen of her parents' house in Scottsdale, Arizona. Everything around us looked like a magazine photo. Polished marble floors, tall glass windows, a refrigerator that probably cost more than my father's car. Madison leaned against the counter like she had just explained something logical, something practical, something that shouldn't require further discussion. "My name is Ethan Caldwell." At that time, I was 17 years old. My family lived in a modest neighborhood outside Phoenix. My father, Daniel Caldwell, worked 12 hours a day as a mechanic. My mother, Linda Caldwell, ran a small daycare out of our home. We never had much money, but I had never once been ashamed of where I came from, until that moment. Madison Harper was the kind of girl people noticed the second she walked into a room. Tall, confident, always dressed like she belonged in a country club advertisement. Her father, Richard Harper, owned a commercial real estate firm. Their house alone could have paid for my parents' mortgage 3 times over. We had been dating for almost a year. At least that's what I thought. But in that moment, standing there with my half-tied tie hanging around my neck, it felt like I had misunderstood something important. "I just don't want things to get awkward tonight," Madison said. She said it calmly, almost kindly. "My dad's business partners will be there, and their kids, and people talk." Her eyes moved down to my suit. It wasn't cheap, but it also wasn't something bought from a boutique on Rodeo Drive. "I just think it would be better if I went alone." She said it like someone suggesting we cancel a dinner reservation. For a few seconds, I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have something to say, but because my brain was trying to catch up to what my ears had just heard. This was the girl who had cried on the phone 2 months earlier when she thought I might move to another school. This was the girl who had once told me she loved how grounded I was. This was the girl who used to sit in my car after football games talking about her future. But tonight, apparently, I didn't fit into the version of her life she wanted other people to see. And that realization did something strange to me. It didn't make me angry right away. It made me quiet. Have you ever had a moment where someone reveals exactly how they see you? Not with insults, not with shouting, but with a single calm sentence that tells you where you stand in their world. If you've experienced that moment, you know it changes something inside you. Because suddenly you realize the story you believed you were part of might not be the story the other person was telling. Before we continue, think about this for a second. If you were in Ethan's place right now, standing in that kitchen with someone you trusted telling you to stay home because you weren't impressive enough for their world, what would you do? Would you argue? Would you leave? Or would you simply remember the moment and walk away quietly? Because what Ethan Caldwell decided to do that night would shape the next 10 years of his life. I looked at Madison for a long moment. Then I slowly loosened the tie around my neck. "You're right," I said. She blinked. "Right, yeah." I folded the tie carefully and placed it on the counter. "You should go alone." For the first time, she looked slightly confused. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult her. I didn't try to defend myself. I simply walked past her toward the door. "Ethan," she called after me. But I didn't stop, because something important had just become clear. If someone feels embarrassed standing beside you, the worst thing you can do is fight for a place in their world. The smartest thing you can do is step out of it. The cool night air outside felt strangely calm. The Harper house sat inside a gated community filled with identical luxury homes. Perfect lawns, perfect lighting, perfect silence. I walked down the long driveway toward my old Honda parked near the street. My reflection in the car window looked different than it had an hour earlier. Not weaker, just clearer. That night, I didn't go home immediately. Instead, I drove aimlessly through Scottsdale for almost 2 hours. At first, I replayed the conversation again and again in my head. Every word, every pause. But slowly something changed. The embarrassment faded, and something else replaced it. Clarity. Madison Harper wasn't evil. She wasn't cruel. She was simply honest about something many people hide. She cared about status, about appearances, about the way people looked at her life. And suddenly I realized something important. I didn't belong in that world. But more importantly, I didn't want to. The next Monday at school, Madison approached me near the lockers. Her voice sounded softer than usual. Are you still upset? I shrugged. I'm not upset. You just left. You told me to stay home. That's not what I meant. But we both knew exactly what she meant. The truth is, people often regret honesty not because it was wrong, but because it exposed something they prefer to hide. For the rest of senior year, we barely spoke. And strangely, that silence helped me grow faster than anything else. I focused on school, on football, on applying to colleges I never thought I could get into. And the funny thing about humiliation is that it can become powerful fuel if you let it. Because every time I felt tired while studying late at night, I remembered that kitchen. I remembered the sentence. I'm embarrassed to introduce you. That sentence pushed me harder than any motivational speech ever could. 5 years later, I walked into a real estate conference in Chicago as the youngest partner in a rapidly growing investment firm. My company specialized in redeveloping commercial properties across the Southwest. The industry was competitive, brutal at times, but I loved every second of it. Confidence had replaced insecurity. Experience had replaced hesitation. That evening at the conference reception, I heard a familiar voice behind me. Ethan Caldwell. I turned, and there she was, Madison Harper. But she looked different now. Not worse, just human, less polished, less certain. Life had clearly been teaching her lessons too. Wow, she said quietly. I heard your company's name earlier today, and I thought, that can't be the same Ethan. I smiled politely. It's been a while. She nodded. I was actually here with my dad. Richard Harper still ran his real estate firm, but the industry had changed. Competition had increased, and from what I later learned, his company had struggled to adapt. Madison looked at me carefully. I owe you an apology. For what? For that night's senior year. I could tell she had replayed that moment many times too. And here is the interesting part about time. It doesn't erase moments like that. It simply gives people enough distance to see them clearly. I was young, she said, and stupid. I thought people were judging me all the time, and I was terrified of not looking perfect. I listened quietly. Then I nodded. I understand, because I truly did. People rarely hurt others out of pure cruelty. Most of the time, they hurt others because they are afraid. Afraid of judgment. Afraid of losing status. Afraid of looking weak. Before we continue, let me ask you something. If someone apologized to you years after a moment that changed your life, would you accept it? Or would you hold onto the resentment? There isn't a single correct answer. But Ethan Caldwell made a choice that surprised even him. I'm glad you told the truth back then, I said. Madison looked confused. Qley. Yeah. If you hadn't said those words, I might have spent years trying to become someone who fit into your world. And I would have built the wrong life. Her eyes softened. Do you hate me? No, because the truth is, that moment had done something valuable. It forced me to discover my own direction. And sometimes the people who embarrass us in our youth accidentally give us the motivation that shapes our future. Madison smiled faintly. I guess life worked out for you. It worked out the way it needed to. We talked for a few more minutes. Then we went our separate ways. No dramatic reunion. No romantic ending. Just two adults who had once shared a moment that quietly changed the course of both their lives. And sometimes, that kind of ending is the most honest one. Personal reflection. Moments of embarrassment often become defining memories, not because of the humiliation itself, but because of the meaning we assign to them afterward. In Ethan's case, Madison's comment exposed a painful truth about social status and perception in certain environments. People who grow up in highly status-driven communities often internalize the belief that their relationships must reflect their social standing. Madison wasn't necessarily trying to hurt Ethan. She was protecting the version of herself she believed others expected to see. This kind of behavior is more common than many people realize. Humans are deeply influenced by social hierarchies, especially during adolescence, when identity and belonging feel fragile. What makes Ethan's response psychologically interesting is that he did not fight for validation. He stepped away. That decision shifted the power dynamic internally. Instead of trying to earn approval, he redirected his energy toward growth. The motivation that comes from quiet humiliation can be extremely powerful, but it only becomes productive when someone chooses improvement rather than bitterness. Years later, Madison's apology demonstrates another important psychological pattern. Time creates perspective. People often revisit their past behavior and realize how much fear and insecurity shaped their decisions. Her apology wasn't about repairing the relationship. It was about reconciling with the person she used to be. Ethan's acceptance of the apology also reveals emotional maturity. Forgiveness in situations like this does not mean forgetting. It simply means refusing to carry resentment longer than necessary. Both characters changed. Both gained awareness, and neither needed to become enemies for the story to have meaning. Sometimes the most realistic outcome is not revenge or reconciliation. It is understanding.